is also a writer, speaker, startup advisor and recognised AgTech innovation expert. She holds a Master's in System Design and Management from MIT, and she wrote her MIT published Master's thesis on private sector approaches to innovation in agribusiness. Previously, Sarah was a product manager and systems engineer at Charles River Analytics in Boston. She received both a BS in both computer science and human factors engineering from Tufts University, where she was a 3-sport varsity athlete and All-American soccer player. And we're so thankful to have you here in Australia with us, Sarah. So everyone, please welcome Sarah.
Thanks. Sure. I've recently had the opportunity to spend time in Silicon Valley, Iowa, and both rural and regional and urban Australia with AgTech entrepreneurs, with investors, and with farmers. And the different stories from these different groups around the world, to me, tells a story about the hype of AgTech, as well as the realities of what entrepreneurs, like we just heard from, and investors are experiencing, and of course farmers on farm. So that's a bit what I'm going to talk about today. My name is Sarah Nolet. I'm the founder and CEO of AgThentic, where we are helping innovators to build the food system of the future. And I'm really passionate about solving two problems in the food and ag system right now. The first is around bringing the best practices of new venture development, so entrepreneurship, human factors, user-centric design, accelerators, incubators, venture capital, to agriculture, but thinking about how those best-in-class models need to be different for the challenges that you just heard a lot about in agriculture. And the second is around bridging this growing gap between ag tech and agriculture. So drones being a really good example, but there's many more about the overhyped tech and the innovation that's happening in cities and the realities of what's going on farms. The way we do this at AgThentic is helping different types of innovators, largely in the early stage ecosystem, to, for example, for corporates and government to do more than talk about innovation, but actually start taking action. And for accelerators and investors to get out on the farm and understand what's happening in the space. And of course, working directly with startups as well. If you've been paying attention to ag tech at all, you would have heard, and Simon just told us, about feeding 10 billion. And you might have heard also about food waste, how we waste 40% of the food that we grow, and that agriculture employs more people than any other industry in the world, and yet is the least digitized industry. So those are a few common examples of why agriculture and ag tech is a great opportunity to both do good and do well. For me, the leverage point in realizing that vision is startups. So startups, whether you're tracking them from these various providers, there's over multiple thousands of them now in the world in food tech and ag tech, and IoT is an enabler of a vast majority of these startups. So what does that look like? It looks like innovation across the supply chain. So you've heard today about some on-farm innovation. There's also new types of farming systems like indoor agriculture and insect farming for both food and feed. There's innovations along the supply chain like technologies to bring paddock to plate transparency. There's work in food tech around food safety, smart packaging, detecting allergens, giving consumers on-demand information about where their food comes from and what's in it. It's a really exciting space, and to me, startups are the ones that are going to deliver the real value. But unfortunately, we have a long way to go. So many of you might have seen the Gartner Hype Cycle curve before, and this is work done by colleagues at Monsanto Growth Ventures about a year ago for the precision ag space. And you see that in particular for IoT and big data, we still have a long way to go. And I actually think that this is a bit optimistic. This view is for precision ag in largely row crops, largely corn and soy in the US. So if you think about specialty crops, livestock, and some of the unique challenges of Australia, I would say we're even potentially further behind than this. And the real challenge in getting through that trough of disillusionment is the business model, and in solving some of these problems that both Roz and Simon just talked about. That's not to say that investors aren't excited. So AgFunder, who I work a lot with, just put out this half-year report for 2017 that shows investment dollars are up. There's billions going into the sector, and there's over 700 investors, many of whom are not ag tech investors, so tech investors and corporates getting involved and excited about innovation in this space. and over 350 unique deals, and this actually misses a few big later stage raises that just came out in the last couple weeks, as well as a couple exits. So 2 big $300 million exits that went for about 10x money in. So some exciting metrics coming out for investors looking at this space. There's also growing recognition of the challenges. So though the data here show for farm sensors and equipment that there's increasing investment, increasing deal flow, and the trend is in the right direction, some of the qualitative data that's come out recently is that showing that investors are recognizing some of the unique challenges for agriculture in terms of timeframes, in terms of harsh environments. Again, startups, I think, are realizing these challenges well ahead of when investors are seeing them and already starting to solve them. I'm going to talk a little bit about a few of those. And you've heard some of it already, which is really exciting. The first is focus on the users, and most companies need to focus on their user, their customer. This isn't something new, but farmers, again, as you've heard, are a different crowd. And so what does farmer-centric design look like? To me, that doesn't look like going out to farmers once you have a product. How do you bring them in earlier in the process and involve them in the design of the solution and actually reward them as part of the upside? So farmers on the cap table or farmers as advisors and partners in accelerators. It also looks like market segmentation. So when I was just over in Silicon Valley, it's right next to the Central Valley, big specialty crop area. The farmers there are sick to death of AgTech. They don't want any more startups coming and knocking on their door and telling them about solutions that they might have. But my colleagues were just in Missouri and I was just in Iowa. The farmers there are screaming for technology and digital technology in particular. So there's a whole other dimension of segmenting your market around sort of tech fatigue and what we're calling AgTech show ponies. These startups that are getting paraded around to show the huge potential in this space, but that's completely disconnected from the reality of what's happening on farm. You've heard a lot about this one already from Simon and Roz. The realities of the conditions of agriculture are intense, and designing not only for use of the product, but installation of the product and service of the product, and how that impacts your business model and how that impacts farmer trust is massive. Connectivity. You can't talk about AgTech, especially in Australia, without talking about connectivity. And there's lots of solutions that you would have heard of today at both large scale and small scale. The ones that I'm most excited about are the ones happening at the grassroots level. The solar-powered fixed Wi-Fi on-farm that's solving the real problems in valleys and nooks and crannies, and that are coming at a grassroots level, and the farmers trust them because it's their neighbors and nephews and cousins that are actually setting those systems up. Once you get connectivity, though, you then get into two of the most common problems that farmers talk about around data management and interoperability. And the key things here are trust and confidence. None of the systems talk to each other, and even if they do and start to get some data coming together, the farmers are worried about who's getting that value and what happens if they change systems, where does it go? Again, some of the co-ops are starting to solve this, and startups are starting to be really clear about how they manage data and who owns it, which is, of course, the farmer. It's really exciting work in that space as well. And last, the value proposition. So though full automated decision-making on farm through algorithms is really exciting and is definitely coming, and there will be an Internet of Farming things, it will be underlined by a blockchain, we will know where our food comes from, all of this is definitely happening. But the reality of where we're at right now is compliance and record keeping and going from paper to spreadsheet. That's not very sexy. It's definitely not sexy for venture capital investors, and it's often not sexy for entrepreneurs who have a big opportunity cost of getting involved in this sector because things happen faster in other sectors. So how do we think about value propositions for now, as well as that will scale into the future and attract those kinds of investors and support that you need? In Australia, in particular, the momentum around startups is growing. This is just a sample of the ones that we track. There will be many more. There are many more already. And again, IoT is a huge piece of both food tech and ag tech. To me, if these startups are going to be successful, and if we want to support the next generation of startups who are going to be successful innovating in this industry, the key is building capacity. This looks like both entrepreneurial capacity, so how do the accelerators and incubators start to think both about raising capital, but also about building entrepreneurial talent? Entrepreneurship is not something that you're born with, it's something that you can learn, and we need to be teaching that in young and current generations. And it's innovators on the farm, tech-savvy farmers. The current age of farmers around the world is pushing 60 and over 60 in some countries. So the next generation is going to be much more digitally literate. And actually, I think those two things are not that different. One of the entrepreneurs I met over in Iowa, his name is Colin, and he grew up on a corn and soy farm in Iowa, went to uni and studied hardware engineering, and decided he was going to bring some sensors and software to the equipment on his farm and automate it. And so when he went to raise capital, first he sort of fell into the traditional path, was knocking on doors, sending out pitch decks to investors on the coasts. Didn't work. So he said, well, what if we just bring all the farmers, my neighbors and friends and community, to show them how this stuff actually works on a real farm, not a lab farm or a research farm, during harvest, in the real environment, actually working. Not only did he sign up farmer customers for his beta trial, he also raised his seed round on that day on farm. So farmer-centric design, different types of capital, designing for the environment, and building that capacity of entrepreneurship that is tailored to agriculture. To me, those are the keys to success. Thank you.